Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the Fort Worth Public Library. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful sunny day to share in our excitement and love of local history. I'm Linda Barrett, and I'm the manager of genealogy, local history, and archives here at the Fort Worth Library. And everybody is excited to hear what Mr. Patoski's got to say. So I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Leanna Schooley from TCU's Center for Texas Studies.
Thank you, Linda, and good morning, everyone. We are so pleased to see so many new and shining faces in our audience today. A little bit about the Center for Texas Studies briefly at TCU. We do this program, the Community History Workshop Series, as a service in partnership with the Fort Worth Public Library to be able to encourage everyone to be a historian in their own hometown. If you have personal collections, if there are collections that you know of that are in your community, we want to encourage preservation and preserving your personal and local stories. And I think you'll find that today is a really terrific example of preserving a local story. If you'd like to know more about the Center for Texas Studies, I encourage you to join our Facebook page, which is Center for Texas Studies at TCU. Also, please make sure that we have your email address on the sign-in sheet, and I will put you on our email list. We promise not to spam you, but we will send out information about our programs, other things coming up that we do throughout the year. The series today runs on the first Saturday of the month, generally, from January to May, and then September through December. So I want to mention that we are able to bring speakers in to this program through the generosity of the Summerfield G. Roberts Foundation and the Summerlee Foundation. And while we generally focus on regional topics, 2 or 3 times a year we like to reach out and talk about Texas stories or regional stories from other parts of the state. And that's what today is. Our speaker is Nick Patoski, who I feel as though it needs quite little introduction, but he has recently published this new book, Austin to ATX, The Hippies, Pickers, Slackers, and Geeks Who Transformed the Capital of Texas. I resided there during the slacker generation, personally, when I was getting my master's at UT. So I feel like this is a little bit my story too. Joe Nick is in his 4th decade of writing about Texas and Texans. And you are probably familiar with several of the books that he has written, Texas Mountains, Texas Coast, Big Bend National Park, the biographies of the Dallas Cowboys, of Selena, of Willie Nelson, An Epic Life, certainly. And he was a staff writer for Texas Monthly for 18 years, has written for the Austin American Statesman, and so many other publications, local and nationally. He's also done some projects that are really preservation-oriented, doing oral histories with B.B. King, Clarence Fountain of Blind Boys of Alabama, and Little Joe Hernandez. So preserving those oral histories and getting them collected for the Library Conference is just another great preservation effort. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Joe Nick and let him tell you about the Austin that he knows and loves, and that we do too. So, Joe Nick Patoski.
Thank you all for being here today. It's an honor and a pleasure especially, what's the guy talking about Austin here in Fort Worth? You may be wondering that if you don't know or aren't familiar with this story, but my story about Austin ATX starts here because this is my hometown. This is where I grew up. Fort Worth is a great place. It's produced. I like to think I've gotten to follow in the footsteps of a lot of what I consider to be legendary great writers: Bud Shrake, Dan Jenkins, Gary Cartwright, folks like that who preceded me. They went to Pascal. I went to Heights. We had John Denver and Lee Harvey Oswald. But for me, Fort Worth was a great place to grow up. It was a great place to come from. It remains a great place. And in fact, full circle, I've been back here. I came back yesterday to sit down to start working on an oral history of someone that I've known for a while, Sumter Brew. And it's great to hear other people here that are all involved. I'm not the only guy that's turned on by this subject, and that the interest and the desire to spread the word and to talk about the great musical traditions of Fort Worth. I know there's books being written right now. I know people like Bill Mackey and what he's done at Record Town and reviving Record Town. John David Bartlett and Mike Price have been talking about their preservation projects and our interest, all our mutual interest in Robert Ely and his 5 Careless Lovers and the new Bluebird nightclub. If y'all never heard of these places, you think I'm talking trash and what's this got to do with Fort Worth? Well, it's an important part of it. It identifies Fort Worth's culture. And that's basically why I spent, people are asking, well, how long did you work on this book? I guess it started in 1973, which was the year that I moved to Austin by choice. But I'd had a history with Austin that goes back to being a little kid. And I think everyone in Texas, you don't grow up in Texas without being aware of your state capital, the place, the seat of government, of home of the state university. All these things are important. But that's not the story that I was after. And it really begins when I'm probably about 7 or 8 years old, and my father would load us up in his Studebaker Silverhawk, and we would drive down US 81. There wasn't even an interstate yet. And we go all the way down to Padre Island, South Padre Island, when there's only a couple motels and a convenience store in the Palmetto Inn. There's nothing there. And that was a long drive. It was 12 hours minimum to get down from Fort Worth all the way down to the tip of Texas. And inevitably, my parents would stop. My father and stepmother would pull over in Austin, and they'd go to Schultz Garden and have a beer. And look, I'd seen them drink beer here in Fort Worth, all over the place. This was kind of special. This was like a place that looked old. And there were all these people there that were doing the same thing, drinking beer and talking under these big oak trees. And I think that was really my first introduction to Austin. And it's a pretty important one, because as I make the point in this book, that the oldest business in Austin, Texas is Schultz Garden. It's a place founded by Germans, a German community, for the purpose of drinking beer, singing, dancing, making music. And if you don't understand Austin, that's a good place to start understanding. The oldest business in town is about drinking beer and having a good time and making music. And that really is kind of a defining factor. Everybody talks about Austin being, it's got 2 great institutions, state government, and it's got state government is an important part, and it's got the university, which is a very important part, because historically, the university always brought in new ideas, new people, whether they were professors from out of Texas going back to the late 19th century, early 20th century. New ideas would filter into Austin consistently, and some of these people had ideas. They got run out of town pretty quick. But these ideas were always coming in, and if you grew up in Texas and you aspired to having a higher education, and you didn't go to a local college, you probably want to go to the university. And the university was a place where if you didn't fit in your hometown in Texas, you probably could be at least tolerated in Austin. That was that tradition. It was tolerance. And it was this, you know, it's kind of transient. People are going back and forth, whether it's professors, students, whatever, but these are kind of defining factors. And going back to the start of Austin, before there was Austin, there was a little village called Waterloo. And in 1838, Mirabeau Lamar, who was going to be the second president of the Republic of Texas, was visiting with a delegation. And this was the western edge of the Republic of Texas. This was the frontier. This was Comanche territory, basically. And a little bitty village there. So Lamar is hanging out there and looking around, and there was word buffaloes are coming into town. And buffaloes used to range as far as Austin. And they got a hunting party up, and near the corner of 8th and Congress, Mirabeau Lamar, who was a poet. He was also a great Indian exterminator, but let's focus on the poet part. He was a poet, and he shot a buffalo near 8th and Congress, and his hunting party rode up to this hill a little farther north, which is the present location of the state capital of Texas. And Mirabeau Lamar declared, this should be the seat of empire. Declaration. And pretty soon he moved, when he became president, the capital of the Republic of Texas moved from Houston to Austin. Now, this was a pretty crazy move that, you know, you shoot a buffalo and declare this is where the capital should be. I mean, think about it. And there's really no reason for Austin to be any kind of capital. It's on a river, but it's not navigable. It's on the western fringe of this republic. It's not where the population is like in Houston. Of course, it's not swamp-ridden, I mean, malaria-ridden, it's not Houston. And in fact, Lamar becomes president of the republic, and Austin is the capital of the republic. And then Sam Houston becomes president of the republic again. Sam Houston is the first president, and he becomes president again. And he was the capital back to Houston briefly in a great tug-of-war. At the end of the day, when Texas finally becomes a state and enters the United States, Austin is the settled capital of Texas. So by virtue of being this capital, again, the transient population kind of defines it. There's not a whole lot of people who are from Austin. But there's people coming in and out. And all the way up to I would say 1970, it was thus, that if you were from Fort Worth, you were a little different, or you wanted to really pursue an education, maybe you went to A&M, maybe you went to TCU or Baylor, but generally you went to UT. And it was this free space, and so it was like kind of a Texas thing. Kids from all over the state would come into Austin and, you know, do their thing, and it basically promoted these ideas to where, let's put it in the 1960s. You came from Fort Worth, you went to UT, you graduate, you're supposed to come home, or you're supposed to go somewhere and seek your fortune. If you got big ideas, New York or California maybe. But at the very least, you come home or you go to Dallas or Houston, go make your money. And if you stay in Austin in this period, like 1960s up to the 60s, a lot of people back home think something's wrong. They didn't come back. And what if they decided to stay? If anyone decided to stay, you had to get a job with either state government or with the university, because there really wasn't much, there was no industry. There was no cattle, there was no oil, none of this existed. It's not like the rest of Texas in that respect. And it was a terrible place to be aspirational, all the way up to 1970. So, you know, if you got a degree and you were qualified to go out there and go make money in the world, oh, well and good, but you decided to stay because life's pretty easy in Austin. And, you know, there's that beer drinking, hot summer day, not too motivated. Let's go swim in Barton Springs. No city's got a Barton Springs within a mile of downtown like that. And it just kind of promoted itself and kind of egged itself on. And then there was always music in the background. People talk about Nashville being Music City. And excuse my French, but that is a bunch of bullshit. Because when you look at Austin, that you had the Texas Folklore Society established by J. Frank Dobie in the early 1900s. You had the whole idea of music scholarship, music history. that music was more than just a confection. It was something to be studied and examined. And John Lomax, Alan Lomax, Bess Lomax, the whole discipline of music folklore in America was hatched in the University of Texas. So there's a great deal of respect for what music does to people and how it brings us all together. But okay, up to 1970, we're still like, this is kind of a place, terrible place to be aspirational. It was the one place in Texas that had a significant hippie population in the 1960s. There were a handful of hippies here. I remember the first time I purchased marijuana was at a hippie's house off of a Bluebonnet Circle, and it was just, there was foil on all the windows so you couldn't see inside. There was a purple light bulb rather than a regular light bulb in this house. And I don't know how, anyhow, it was scary to be a hippie in Fort Worth or even hang around with you. You're going to go to jail if you got caught. But, you know, it was kind of a different, there was enough of a critical mass in Austin that, you know, there was a community. Of course, it was only maybe about 4 or 5 houses, but there were hippies, and they were sort of tolerated in Austin. But just like anyone else that was in Austin, if you were an aspirational hippie, Austin was a terrible place to be. There were greener pastures, and that was San Francisco. So in the 1960s, you had all these people, if they were different, and even different but with ideas and ambition, you left, and you went to San Francisco, and there was a whole migration. I mean, famously, Janis Joplin, the singer, left Austin, along with Pal St. John, one of her bandmates in the Waller Creek Boys. There was a guy named Chet Helms that left Texas. Chet's uncle was a holy roller preacher in Texas, and he did, they did revivals, and they learned, Chet learned how to do those posters they'd stick up on telephone poles all over the place. Revival coming. Well, he took that knowledge with him to San Francisco, and he basically was the head of a collective. It wasn't really a business, it was a collective, a group called the Family Dog, and they had a dance hall called the Avalon Ballroom, where a lot of Texans like Johnny Winter, the 13th Floor Elevators, Shiva's Head Band, a lot of Texas bands played at the Avalon Ballroom. But Chet Helms, basically, in order to advertise these shows, started the psychedelic poster. He learned this old tradition from holy roller preaching and put it on this template of psychedelia where, bright colors and all this, and had all these poster artists do it, and basically started the modern poster. And the poster remains an associated element of music. It's part of music. It's not enough to just listen to music. You got to see the poster and the advertisement and all that. Well, all these are Texas ideas. But you had to go to San Francisco to do it. Rip Off Press, Gilbert Shelton, the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers, Underground Comics. All these things were Texas ideas, but you couldn't work them out here in Texas. You look different. You're likely someone's going to look at you and beat the crap out of you just for being different. So these people had to go somewhere where they were comfortable to work out these ideas. That was San Francisco. And people kept leaving. And that was Austin. Austin was a sleepy town. In 1970, it was nowhere near as large as Fort Worth. Didn't have much dynamic. People just talked. It was a university and state capital. But around about 1970, 71, people quit leaving for San Francisco, and a few people started coming back. And one guy in particular, a musician from San Antonio named Doug Song, who I've written about and did a movie about, the Sir Douglas Quintet had been kind of had a second life in San Francisco as a psychedelic band. But Doug Song got homesick, and he went back to San Antonio. And he had long hair, and he had cowboy boots. I ran a record store called Natural Records on College Avenue in 1971 here in Fort Worth. And I remember when I got a copy of that Doug Song, The Return of Doug Saldana, and I saw a guy with this cowboy shirt, jeans, pointy-toed boots, cowboy hat, and long hair, and that image just spoke to me. Man, it's like the combination of everything that I've known. I mean, being a cowboy was okay, but being a hippie was okay too. And here's a guy that represented it all. And I saw this guy at this album cover, and he's sitting on this porch, and he's holding a bottle of Big Red soda pop. I went immediately down the block to a convenience store and had my first Big Red, because I wanted to know what was so good about it. Well, Doug Sahm went back, he did this out in The Return of Doug Saldana, he went back to San Antonio, but within 6 months, he gets beat up by a Bexar County sheriff, basically for being different. It just didn't like the looks of him. He was physically beat up. And at that point, Doug said, I'm going to Austin. Because he discovered there were hippies there. There weren't just hippies there, and he wouldn't get beat up. But there were all these different music groups, all this different kind of music being made that was different and new. And it spoke to him. He was a guy Doug Sahm was a guy that grew up playing lap steel guitar as a child prodigy, encouraged by none other than Hank Williams. And by the time he's a teenager, his family moves near a Chitlin Circuit club, a juke joint. So he's watching T-Bone Walker and Gaynell Brown play guitar directly. This guy's got an education, direct education, like no one has. And he's always looking for ways to work out all the different music he knows. Well, in Austin, he's finding all these different bands, and they all know this kind of music he's playing. And when Doug Sahm shows up in Austin, that's a signal. He's been in San Francisco. He's been to the mountaintop. And he thinks this is better. And as Doug said, he said warmer weather and better looking women. And in a nutshell, that's what prompted him to come. And that was a signal. You didn't have to go to San Francisco anymore. Very small group. The hippies started getting this idea that maybe there's something here. And critical mass builds upon itself. I didn't arrive until 1973. But so much of this book parallels just what I've experienced. And this is why the subtitle, it starts with hippies. Because they